Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Do we still hear that echo? Or are we all good?
Good, thank you.
Okay,
No echo.
alhamdulillah. Sorry about that. We've had an extended hiatus, so I had to get back into the groove. Alhamdulillah. Welcome everyone to our weekly Maliki Fiqh class. And Sister Akanke, I believe you said that Maghrib, where you are, is actually 7:15 now?
Yeah, it just came in. The event just sounded.
Okay. So if people need to cut out to make Maghrib, I totally understand that. I am gonna try to figure out a time that is not in the middle of a prayer for any of us, but I don't know if that's possible. Because on the East Coast, what time does Maghrib come in? Sidi Hassan. Assalamu alaikum, by the way. I know I owe you a call. Or anybody else. What time does Maghrib come in on the East Coast?
I'm in Ohio, so but I guess that's not truly the East Coast. But I checked
Right.
Atlanta and I checked New York. New York is 7:40 or 7.
At 6:41 about. Yeah.
Okay.
Alhamdulillah.
Dinner is about now.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the drawing board and try to figure out what time we might need to do the class a little earlier than I initially wanted. Let me see, because if we end, I guess if I did around 2:30, we would end around 3:30, which is you all's 5:30. So how about if we started at 5:30 East Coast time? Would that work better for people? Good for me?
Yes, that would work better for me.
Okay. Then
You
what'd you say? Sidi Hassan, what'd you say? Maybe he wasn't talking to me. Okay. Well, I'll see what I can I can rearrange things. Alhamdulillah. Thank you all for being patient. I appreciate the fact that you all are here. Now that we're back, I know the time is funky, and I'm still trying to figure out my schedule of teaching. And as you can hear in the background, I have my youngest Hassan is also in the mix. He's normally asleep around this time, but today he happens to be awake, so we'll have a little bit of background noise. But inshallah, we'll try to manage it for next week a little bit differently. So we're still working out some kinks, but basically, for anybody who doesn't know, I teach at the university out here, UC Irvine, and now that I'm teaching, I had to change the time. So we're still figuring out the best time to work. So jazakumullah khair, all of you, for your patience. Since I know at least one person is in Central Time and will have to take a break to make salat, and I know that Muhammad, we're coming back from having taken a long break. I don't think I want to jump right back where we left off with regard to Sujuda Saw, because Sujuda Saw already can be like a little bit complicated. Hold on one second. Okay, so now I think Hassan is a little bit happier. Alhamdulillah. As I was saying, because we took a kind of long hiatus, and I know Sujuda Saw is, maybe kind of a difficult subject for us to just kind of jump in and out of. I think what I want to do today is I want to back up a little bit and do a little bit of review of some of the parts of Salat, Fard, Sunnah Muakkada, because this will help us better understand what we're talking about in Sujood Saw. I believe our last class, someone who was just joining us had asked, okay, how do we know which parts of the prayer are Fard, which parts of the prayer are Sunnah? Because this determines how we properly make sujood saw to fix a mistake in the prayer. So we're going to do a brief review of some of that today, inshallah, and then next week we're going to jump right back in to sujood saw. And I'm going to keep class a little bit abbreviated today so that we have some time for questions and answers. Questions that people might have had and have been waiting to get answered, and also for folks who might be new to our class, we can talk a little bit more about what we're up to here, what book we're studying, all of that good stuff. So, alhamdulillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وأزواجه أمهات المؤمنين وذرياته وأهل البيت كما صليت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم إني أسألك من كل خير سألك من محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأعوذ بك من كل شر استعاذك من محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أجرنا وما أعلنا وما أنت أعلم منا ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات ومن فتنة القبر ومن فتنة مسيح الدجال ومن عذاب النار وسوء المصير رضي الله عن أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم يا حمد الشيخ أحضرنا بهذا المحضر والتعب في نظرة تهدينا بالغفر أما بعد alhamdulillah. So as you all know, my name is Ustadh Habibur-Rasul, and we are here gathering for our weekly Maliki Fiqh class, taken from the lessons that I studied from Sheikh Amin Abdul Awal, who in turn studied them from Dr. Suleiman Dunya, rahmatullahi alayhi. He taught him from a book called Shar as-Saghir by Sheikh Ahmed Dardir, radiallahu anhu. And he taught him various subjects from that book. So that is the information that we are studying and reviewing. Tayyib. So, quick overview. Inshallah ta'ala, many of you have taken this subject with us in the past, and we've reviewed it as far as but we want to go over the 14 fards of salah, the 14 fara'id of salah. Assalamu alaikum. Do I have a question? Okay. Alhamdulillah, the 14 fara'id, the 14 fard parts of the prayer. And you'll see this listed and described a little bit differently in different books of fiqh. For instance, the book, the Ashmawiyah, I think talks about 13 fards of salah, but the information is essentially the same. It's just organized a little bit differently in the different books. Tayyib. So what are the 14 fara'id of salah? This is something that I've said many times that I hope you all have memorized or can memorize, inshallah ta'ala. And I'm going to go through them relatively quickly because it is a review. So the first fard of the prayer is the niyyah, the intention of the prayer. And the niyyah is something that, unlike the other fara'id that we're going to mention, the niyyah is something that needs to be in place before you begin the prayer. It's not something that you can simply make sujood sahu. It's not something you can simply go back and fix and make sujood sahu for, right? The niyyah should be in place before you begin the prayer. But the niyyah, the intention, right? The intention does not have to be something that you say audibly, right? It doesn't have to be that when you begin the salah, you say, I make my intentions to make such and such salah. No, it's enough for it to be in your heart and in your mind that you are making the particular prayer that you are making. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome. So the first fard is the niyyah. The second fard of the salah is the takbiratul ihram. The takbiratul ihram is the first takbir, the first time you say Allahu Akbar when you enter the prayer. And once again, as I said, I'm going through this information a lot quicker than I have in the past because it's a review. So the first time we say Allahu Akbar to enter the prayer, to enter this sacred state of ihram, where we're entering the prayer, we call that takbiratul ihram. This is also a fard of the prayer. The third fard of the prayer is that you must be standing while you say Allahu Akbar. If you have the ability to stand, if you're not a person who is incapacitated in a wheelchair or anything like that, if you have the ability to stand, then for the fard prayer, you must be standing when you say the takbiratul ihram, when you say Allahu Akbar to start the prayer. Now, if you're praying a sunnah prayer, then you have the ability, to pray while you're sitting or something like that, even if you don't have the ability, even if you had the ability to stand. But for the fard prayer, if you have the ability to stand, then you have to stand in order for the prayer to be valid. While you're making the takbiratul ihram, you must be standing. The fourth fard is to say al-Fatiha, or to say al-Fatiha, the al-Quran, the mother of the book, the first chapter, So we say that, and then the fifth fard is to be standing while you say al-Fatiha. The sixth fard is to make ruku', right? To bend over with your hands on your knees. Sometimes the book specify actually your hand should be sort of above your knees, and your fingers should be on your knees. The seventh fard is to make the back straight again after bowing. So in other words, to stand up again after ruku'. So you go into ruku' and then you stand up. This is a fard. The eighth fard is sujood, right? And here in our book, they list sujood one time as the fard, but you have to make it twice in the rak'ah, right? So the eighth fard is sujood, right? Even though it's mentioned once, they mean both of the sajdas, both of the sajdatain. Then the ninth fard is to sit in between the two sajdas, the two sujood, the two sajdatain. You sit, so you make sajda, then you sit in the sitting position, which in Arabic is called jalsa, and then you go into sajda again. And then the 10th fard is to say assalamu alaikum, right, to the right, one time. This is the fard. According to the Maliki method, this is sufficient to end the prayer. To say assalamu alaikum to the left, or to say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, this is a sunnah. This is good to do. Some of the Malikis, they just say assalamu alaikum once to the right, and that's it. And they say this is the stronger position, right? Others, they say it is better if you say assalamu alaikum wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to the right and the left, but the right is the only one that is the fard, right? And we've talked about the different positions regarding that. The 11th fard is that you must be sitting when you say assalamu alaikum to end your prayer. So if you're in the middle of the prayer, you're wrapping up and you're rushing and you say assalamu alaikum while you're standing up, then the prayer becomes invalid, right? You haven't done that fard, right? Or you would have to fix that. The 12th fard is ta'manina. Ta'manina, you could translate it as stillness, right? But ta'manina in this context, it essentially means to spend a little time in each position of the prayer, not to rush through the prayer, right? You don't want to be the chicken, pray like the chicken where your head just kind of bumps on the ground, you jump back up. No, you want to spend a moment. Doesn't have to be a long moment, but enough of a moment in each position to make each position distinct from all the other positions of the prayer, right? That's ta'manina. The 13th fard is ittidal. And ittidal means essentially to make each position in its proper way. So in other words, when you're standing in qiyam, you're not slouching or leaning on a wall or something like that, right? When you make ruku, you're not kind of just halfway bent over. No, you go into the position, bending your back all the way as you should in the position, right? This is the 13th fard, which is ittidal. Now, if a person doesn't have the ability to do each position in exactly the right way, then that's different. Then that person can have an allowance, and there's different. That person is in a different situation, right? That person's in a different situation. But for the person who has the ability to do each position properly, then this is a fard. It has to be done. And the 14th fard is to follow the order of each fard, right? To do all of the fards in their proper order, in the proper sequence of the prayer. I think this is the fard that the Ashmawiyya doesn't mention, which is another beginning Maliki Fiqh book. That's very good. I recommend people read. But in our book, they mention that you must make all of the fara'id in order. Now, just because it doesn't say that in another book doesn't mean that the author of that book didn't know it. It's just organized a little bit differently. So here the author made mention of the fact that the parts of the prayer must be done in their proper sequence as an additional fard of the prayer. So those are the fards of the prayer, the fara'id of the prayer, the obligatory parts of the prayer. And as we said last week, why is this important? Because if you miss a fard in the prayer, if you forget to say Fatiha, or you forget to make a ruku', or you forget to make a sajda, you have to go back and fix that fard. It is not sufficient for you to make sujood saw, make the prostration of forgetfulness because you omitted that thing. You have to actually go back. Once you remember that you missed the fard, you have to go back and redo that fard. And as we said in last class, if you remember that fard before you reach the ruku' of the following rak'ah, then you can simply go back, make the fard that you missed, and continue your prayer from that point. And you would make sujood sahu after salams, right? And I realize we have a couple people who may not have been here in our last class. Sujood sahu is the prostration of forgetfulness. This is what you do to fix a mistake in the prayer, right? And specifically, sahu means when you forget something, meaning when you left something out, right? There's different words for forgetting in Arabic, but when you left something out. And so when you make a mistake in the prayer, right? You make sujood sahu to fix it, and we'll talk about exactly what the process of sujood sahu is in a moment. But this is how you fix a mistake in the prayer. And Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad. If you omit something from the prayer, you make sujood sahu before you salam out of the prayer to account for the thing that you omitted from the prayer. If you add something to the prayer, right, and this is all if you do it as an accident, by mistake. If you intentionally leave something out of the prayer, add something to the prayer, then this just invalidates the prayer, right? Unless it's a mustahab of the prayer or something like that. But if you intentionally omit a fard or a sunnah mu'akkada, this invalidates the prayer. Or if you intentionally add something to the prayer, it invalidates the prayer, right? Generally speaking. Now in the sunnah prayer, there's some sunnah mu'akkada that you don't necessarily have to do, but we'll get into that when it's time to get into that, inshallah ta'ala. But if you forgetfully, by mistake, add something to the prayer, or rather omit something from the prayer, you make sujood sahu before salam. And if you mistakenly add something to the prayer, you make sujood sahu after salam. Now, we just said if you miss a fard, right? Well, if you miss a fard, you're not going to make sujood sahu before salams. Why? Because if you miss a fard, you have to actually go back and redo the fard. You have to go back and do the fard thing that you missed, right? And by going back and doing the fard thing that you missed, you will now be in a situation where you've added extra movements to the prayer, right? And so if you miss a fard, you have to go back and fix the fard, and then you will likely have to make sujood sahu after salams because you added some actions to the prayer and fixing the fard. So let's say, as an example, you forgot to make Fatiha, right, while standing, right? And you remember, right? Or that's not the best example because that comes right before ruku. So let's say you forget to make a sajda. You made one sajda in the first rak'ah of dhuhr, and then you stood up in qiyam, and you remembered, I didn't make my second sajda. What do? You go and you sit down, and you make the sajda that you missed. You sit down in jalsa because this is the position just before the thing that you missed. So you sit in jalsa, right? And then you make the sajda, right? And then you stand up and you complete your prayer from that point. But that movement, that where you stood up, right? You stood up from sajda, right? And then had to go back to fix it. That extra movement means now you've added something to the prayer and you have to make sujood sahu after salams, right? Let's say you don't remember that you omitted that sajda until after you made the ruku' of the next rak'ah. So you've made ruku' now. You forgot sajda, you stood up in jalsa, and then you bent into ruku', and then you stood up and remember, oh, I didn't make sajda in the last rak'ah. Okay, now you are going to act as if that rak'ah that you made didn't happen. And now this rak'ah, which was your second rak'ah, you're going to treat as your first rak'ah. So because you didn't remember until after you went into ruku', you can't simply go back and fix that part of the prayer. You have to replace that rak'ah with a new rak'ah, right? But now you have this phantom incomplete rak'ah that you started the prayer with, which is an addition to the prayer. And so because of that, you're going to make sujood sahu after salams, right? Now, if you were not here in the previous weeks, I know it might have been hard to follow that, but I'm hoping that for most of you, being that this was a review, this was a refresher. Does anybody have any questions of what we talked about so far? Or is any of that unclear to anyone? Hassan, you need clarity? Not Sidi Hassan, Hadi Hassan, but little Hassan. Alhamdulillah. So how do we feel? We feel good about that? We understand that? There was some clarity there? Can I get a thumbs up if we're clear?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. What'd you say? Uncle Yahya. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. What'd you say?
Alaikum salam wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So brother Omar, I was thinking this might be a little take a little time to process because you just jumping into the class. So we're gonna go over it again, inshallah ta'ala, a little bit slowly, but you have at least the contours of sujood sahu, right? And we'll go through it again, inshallah ta'ala. One more part. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala sayyidina Muhammad. One more thing that I want to discuss is how do you actually go about making sujood sahu, right? And then we're going to talk about some of the sunan of the prayer, and then we're going to have some Q&A, inshallah. But how do you actually make sujood sahu? Well, when you make sujood sahu before salam, you go through the prayer as you normally would. You get to the end of the prayer as you normally would, and you say, "Oh, someone said an infographic would be great." Yes, it would be. Inshallah, maybe we can work on that. Inshallah, if you could help us with that. Inshallah ta'ala, if you have the ability, because that would be awesome. So alhamdulillah, jazakumullah khair, thank you. But for now, inshallah, just to give a description, the way we will make the sujood sahu before salams is when you get to the sitting, to the jalsa at the end of your prayer. When you say atahiyat, you say atahiyatu lillah, zakiyatu lillah, wa salawatu wa tayyibatu lillah, assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. And then you stop there before you say the shahada, right? Before you say the atashahud. You stop there just before you say the atashahud, and you say Allahu Akbar and make sajda. And you say Allahu Akbar and you sit in the sitting position, and then you say Allahu Akbar and make sajda again, and then you say Allahu Akbar and you sit. So now you've made 2 extra sujood, 2 extra sajdatain. And this is the sujood sahu, the prostration of forgetfulness that is made when you leave something out of the prayer, when you omit something from the prayer. And you say the same things that you would normally say in the sajda and in the sitting position in your salah. Then when you sit back after you've made the 2 extra sajdatain, you say the atahiyat and the tashahud as you normally would to end the prayer. Atahiyatu lillah, zakiyatullah, wa salawatu wa tayyibatu lillah, assalamu alaykum ya nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, assalamu alaykum wa ala ibadillahi salihin, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wahdahu la sharika lahu, wa ashhadu anna muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka hamidun majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka hamidun majid. And all the dua that you would normally say to end your prayer. And then you say assalamu alaikum rahmatullah to end the prayer, right? Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah, both sides, if you do both sides, which is what I do. And then the prayer is finished. If you need to make sujood sahu after salams for adding something to the prayer, right? Which is the situation you will find yourself in if you omitted a fard and then you went back and fixed the fard. Now you've added extra movements to the prayer. So now you will make sujood sahu after salams. How do you do that? Well, when you get to the end of your prayer, you finish your prayer as you normally would. And then you say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah or assalamu alaikum just to your right. Just to your right. Even if you normally say to your right and your left when you end your prayer, now you're going to say just to your right. And you're going to say Allahu Akbar and you're going to make sajda. And you're going to say Allahu Akbar and then sit in jalsa. Then you're going to say Allahu Akbar and make sajda. And then you're gonna say Allahu Akbar and sit back in the sitting position. And you're gonna end your prayer by saying Attahiyatu lillah, Zakiyatu lillah, wa salawatu wa tayyibatu lillah, Assalamu alaikum ya nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Assalamu alaikum wa ala ibadillahi salihin, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. And then you're gonna stop without saying Salat ala Nabi. You're gonna stop and you're gonna salam out of the prayer to end your prayer. Assalamu alaikum wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And this is how you make sujood saw. I know this is quicker than I normally describe it, but again, I want this to be more of a review. And inshallah ta'ala, when we come back next week, we'll go through it, another time, a little bit more slowly, and add on to what we've talked about in previous weeks, inshallah ta'ala. Does anybody have any questions about what we discussed so far? Sidi Hassan, I see your question. Does anybody have any questions about what we just discussed, inshallah? Okay. So Sidi Hassan, I don't know if I completely understand your question. You said, does the phantom rak'ah, or maybe phantom isn't the best way to put it, but the incomplete rak'ah that you have to replace, the invalid rak'ah, the rak'ah that's invalid because it's missing a fard that you have to replace, you said, does it occur throughout the second, third, or fourth rak'ah? What do you mean by that? You're still on mute. See, maybe you're not able to take yourself off mute. Okay. Inshallah, when you are able to, let us know so I can get some clarity on the question, inshallah ta'ala. Lastly, before we open up all the way for Q&A and get ready to wrap up, inshallah ta'ala, we want to discuss some of the, you can't, okay. If you can type a clarification, that would be good. I'm sorry, I'm really not sure what you mean by this when you say, does it occur? Do you mean, can such an incomplete rak'ah happen in as the third or fourth or fifth rak'ah? If that's your question, then the answer is yes. Any rak'ah that you yes, okay, alhamdulillah. So let's say you finish your first rak'ah and then you make your second rak'ah. And the second rak'ah is the rak'ah where you forgot to make sajda. And you don't remember until you've made the ruku' of the third rak'ah. Then what do? Then you will treat that second rak'ah. That second rak'ah will be like the phantom rak'ah, as I put it before, right? And your third rak'ah now takes the place of it and becomes the second rak'ah. Right now, the third rak'ah becomes like the second rak'ah. Tayyib. Allahumma salli wa sallam ala sayyidina Muhammad. So some of the sunnah of the prayer, the sunnahs of the prayer, right? The first sunnah of the prayer, alhamdulillah, rabbil alameen. The first sunnah of the prayer is to recite a verse, a surah or a verse other than Al-Fatiha in the first and second rak'ah of the fard prayer, right? So when you make a fard prayer, after you say Fatiha, you say some verses from Quran, right? You say a surah or some verses from Quran, right? Now, this is considered a sunnah mu'akkidah, right? If you miss this, then you will need to make sujood sawa before salams to fix it. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. So, and this is specifically for the fard prayer. If you were to make just Fatiha and a sunnah prayer, that would be acceptable. And this is actually what we're advised to do in the prayer we call Raghiba al-Fajr. This is the 2 rak'ah sunnah prayer that we make before we make, or mustahab prayer that we make before we make Salatul Subh, before we make the fard prayer of Fajr. The fard prayer of the time of Fajr. The Malikis, we call it Salatul Subh. So before you make the fard prayer at the time of Fajr, you can make two nafila. Two nafila is the word I was looking for. Two optional or non-obligatory rak'ah of prayer. And the Prophet ﷺ said that this has a big, immense value, right? Big value. It's not a fard. It's not even considered to be one of the strong, sunnah prayers that we should make all the time. But it's sort of just under that because it has such a big value, big merit. Allahumma salli wa sallim. So we should make it all the time if we can, but it's not as important, for instance, as the witr prayer, which is the last prayer we make at night. Allahumma salli wa sallim. So the first sunnah is to recite Fatiha in the first and second. I mean, after you recite Fatiha, to recite a surah or some verses of Quran after Fatiha in the first and second rak'ah of the prayer. The second sunnah is to recite these verses or this surah after al-Fatiha. The second sunnah is to recite it after Fatiha. So the first sunnah is to recite some Quran in your first and second rak'ah other than al-Fatiha. The second sunnah is to place this surah or these verses of Quran that you make other than Fatiha in the first and second rak'ah after the Fatiha, right? So the second sunnah is to place the surah that you make other than Fatiha after Fatiha. If you forgetfully recite this before you recite Fatiha, let's say you forget to recite Al-Fatiha and you start to recite Qul Huwallahu Ahad in your salah, right? And then you remember, oh, I never made Fatiha. Then you should go back and recite Al-Fatiha, and then you should recite Qul Huwallahu Ahad again after you make the Fatiha, right? So if you start saying Qul Huwallahu Ahad or Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq, you start saying one of these surahs of Quran in the beginning of your prayer, right? And then you remember, oh, I actually forgot to make Fatiha, but you remember before you go into Ruku, no problem. You say Fatiha, and then you go back and repeat the surah that you were going to say, the surah that you need to say after Fatiha, the surah other than Fatiha. And the author says that that if you want to recite a verse of Quran and it's mustahab to recite an entire verse. But let's say you're reciting a verse that's very, very long. There's a verse in the Quran that's a whole page long, right? The author says that if you recite part of the verse, but the part of the verse that you recite has a complete meaning, then it covers you. You will have fulfilled the sunnah of saying some verses of Quran after Fatiha. But it's mustahab to at least say an entire verse. So something like Ayatul Kursi would be fine because that's an entire verse. It's mustahab to at least complete the verse. And some say it's even good if you do 3 verses, but it's okay if you do 1 verse as long as you complete the verse. Excuse me 1 second, Jamaat. Say assalamu alaikum, Hassan. Alhamdulillah, your nephew fell. Alhamdulillah. Then the author goes on to say, we have saying a verse other than Fatiha in the first 2 rak'ah of a fard prayer is a sunnah. And then saying it after Fatiha, placing it in the right place, is a sunnah. And then thirdly, to recite this verse or these verses that you make in the first or second rak'ah aloud if it's Salatul Subh or Salatul Maghrib or Salatul Isha, or silently if it's Salatul Dhuhr or Salatul Asr, is also considered a sunnah, right? It's also considered a sunnah, right? So reciting this verse in the first rak'ah, the way they have it organized in this book is they say reciting the verse other than Fatiha silently or aloud in the first rak'ah is a sunnah, and then doing so in the second rak'ah is a sunnah. So it explains it in a very thorough way. So in all, when we look at this, we'll see that just reciting some verses from Quran after Fatiha is a sunnah, but it's a sunnah comprised of 3 sunnahs. The sunnah of saying it, the sunnah of saying it after Fatiha, and the sunnah of saying it silently or aloud. All of that is considered a sunnah. And some even say that in some text, And in some of our lessons with Sheikh Amin, he mentioned that standing for it is also considered a sunnah. So all of these, the sunnah that we call sunnah muakkada, the heavy emphasized sunnah in the salah that require us to make sujood sahl before salams if we miss it even one time, they're all actually compound sunnahs, compound sunnah. The other one is saying the atashahud when we're in jalsa. If we forget to say the atashahud when we're in jalsa, we've actually missed saying the atashahud. We've missed sitting while we say the atashahud, right? And we've missed saying it silently. So we've missed 3 sunnah, right? So both of these are sunnah acts of the prayer that if we miss, we make sujood sahl before the prayer. Now there are other sunnah acts of the prayer, but these other sunnah acts of the prayer, they actually don't require sujood sahl if you miss them just once, right? If you miss 2 or 3, then you will, if you miss 3, right? If you miss more than 2, then it will require sujood sahl before salams. But if you miss, say for instance, saying the takbir after the takbir to ihram, any of the other takbirs of the prayer, if you miss just one, you don't have to make sujood sahl, right? If you miss, for instance, you don't say what's appropriate to say in the ruku or in the sajda, but you make the ruku and you make the sajda, it doesn't require sujood sahl before salams. So we're in there, and I know for some of you all that was all review, for many of you all. But I thought it would be good to kind of get our minds back into the swing of things before we jump into, the kind of challenging subject of sujood sahl. And I wanted to do a review that was at least relevant to the discussion of sujood sahl. So alhamdulillah, I pray that it was beneficial, even if it was just you hearing it a second, third, or fourth time, depending on how long you've been joining us for class. And inshallah, we'll end there and we'll open up the floor for questions. Inshallah, if people have any questions. Bismillah. Any questions? Any questions?
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Let's do Sheikhan.
Sheikh, I have a question. Just want to be clear about the forgetful prayer. I believe the one that comes if you had added something.
Yeah.
When you mentioned doing the sujood forgetfulness, I just wanted to be clear. Based on what you were saying, it sounded to me as if you were doing 4 sujoods.
Yes.
So you're doing 4 sujoods, not 2.
Right. So you're doing 2 extra sujood. You do the two sujood that you would normally do to end the prayer, plus an additional 2. And the additional 2 is what we call sujood sahl, the prostration of forgetfulness.
Perfect.
And, yeah, and you would either make it before you salam out of the prayer or after you salam out of the prayer, depending on the mistake you made.
Depending on the mistake, right? Correct. Jazakallah khair.
Alhamdulillah. The other folks have heard me say this in the past, but there's a joke that some of the students of knowledge make where they say in the Shafi's madhab, if you make a mistake, you fix it this way. In the Hanbali madhab, you make a mistake, you fix it this way. In the Maliki madhab, you just don't make a mistake. You avoid making mistakes because making sujood sahl is complicated in the Maliki madhab. So we're a little bit more complicated, I believe, than some of the other madhahib. And as we discussed in last class, if you are praying behind someone who's educated in the religion, somebody who you know knows how to make sujood sahl, but makes it according to a different madhab, a different methodology, your prayer is valid if you pray behind them. And we talked about the specific nuances, but the short version is this. They will still have made sujood sahl in a way that is acceptable and covers the basic minimum requirement of what we have to do to have a valid sujood sahl. But if you're leading the prayer, you should make sujood sahl according to the way that Imam Malik rahmatullahi teaches us to do it. You follow what I'm saying?
Definitely.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, rabbil alameen. You know, now that I'm teaching, you know, in person, you know, I teach, you know, with a room full of students. But when I taught in Zoom, I would sometimes require the students to turn their camera on. So like I say, I'm not asking you all to do that because we're in a different situation where some of you are working, some of you are tending to family business. But it does help me when, you know, people just give a quick thumbs up or just say, yeah, we got it, just so I know your understanding. You know, if I can see you, I can look you in your eye and see, oh, this person get it, this person doesn't get it. I was not saying that to try to pressure or shame people to turn their cameras on. Now everybody's turning their camera on. You don't have to turn your camera. I like seeing you, but it's okay if you don't turn your camera on. Inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Any other questions? Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Rabbil Alameen. Any questions, not about this subject, but general questions that you may have had that maybe you were sitting on while we weren't meeting for class?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yahya, how you doing, Uncle?
I want to make sure I got what you said here. I'm not sure. Did you say when you make sujood sal, you have to make 2 sujood sals
So when
for
you
a mistake?
Mhm. Finish your thought.
Can you hear me?
I hear you. Yeah, you said, do you have to make 2 sujood sahws?
Yeah, I'm
So
asking the question.
right. So describe to me what you mean when you say 2 sujood sahws. How would you make sujood sahw?
In other words, I'm saying this way. Let's say I had to make sujood sal. I'd make the sujood sal.
Mhm.
You know, I've been down and come up and then do it again twice like that,
Yes.
or just once.
Twice. The same way you make 2 sajdas in the fard prayer at the end of rak'ah, you make 2 more sajdas to make sujood sahw.
All right, got you.
Yeah. So in all, you would have ended that rak'ah with 4 sujood. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillah. Someone asked a question on Zoom on the chat. They said, if you make a mistake, if a person makes a mistake, can they simply opt to do the entire prayer over again, regardless of what kind of mistake it was? So it's better if you don't do that. It's better if you don't do that. And I'm going to say it's better then, because if a person is so confused about whether or not their prayer is correct, you know, that they just make the prayer over again, alhamdulillah. But that shouldn't be your habit. That shouldn't be your habit for 2 reasons. One, the patched prayer is better than the regular prayer, right? The patched prayer, meaning the prayer that has sujood sahw in it, is better than the regular prayer. Why? Because in order to make sujood sahw, you had to learn how to properly make sujood sahw, right? And now that you're in a situation that you have the opportunity to use it, you have to use that knowledge, right? So you're implementing this sunnah that we have from the Prophet ﷺ of how to fix a prayer that has a mistake in it. And you're actually doing some work, right? You've actually done some additional actions. You've done an extra couple of sujood, right? So for all of those reasons, it's good to make sujood sahw when you need to do it. Obviously, you don't intentionally make a mistake in the prayer to make sujood sahw, because this is not respecting the prayer. But if Allah puts you in that situation where you make a mistake, it's better for you to implement the knowledge and make sujood sahw. And this is actually more pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of the additional work that you had to do to acquire the knowledge. So from this, I believe this is a hadith, but the scholars, they teach us that the patch prayer is better than the regular prayer. I have to go back and check if that's actually a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or a saying from the knowledgeable people. But in any case, we're taught that the patch prayer is actually better than the regular prayer. The second reason why I would say you don't want to be in the habit of just remaking your prayer is because this is one of the tricks that the shaitan, a'udhu billah, likes to play. He likes to make us worry whether or not our prayer is correct and then have us second guessing and remaking the prayer so that the prayer becomes overly burdensome, right? This is the trick of the shaitan, a'udhu billah. So we want to close that door and not give the shaitan that opportunity by simply implementing this knowledge of sujood sahw, right? And another thing that it trains you to do when you begin to implement this knowledge it trains you to find balance in how much attention you give to the doubt, right? You may find that there's certain times that doubt enters your mind, and it's really a doubt that's so small that you really don't need to pay attention to it, right? And then there's times when you're gonna find doubt where you really don't know. You're 50-50. I can't remember if I made that sajda or not. I can't remember if I made that rak'ah or not, right? In those cases, you use what you've learned, you make the sujood salah to fix the prayer, and then you don't worry about it anymore. Don't say to yourself, well, maybe I didn't need to make it. No, don't be obsessive like that. That again becomes a opportunity for the shaitan to make us begin to feel bad about our prayer, second guess our prayer. So if you find yourself in a situation where you make a mistake, make the appropriate sujood salah to fix it, and then trust that Allah, who is most merciful, will accept your prayer. Is that helpful? Inshallah. Helpful to hear. Inshallah ta'ala. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. And I see another question in the chat, and this will probably be our last one. If somebody has one more question after this, we can take it, inshallah. But someone said, Assalamu alaikum, wanted to know. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So briefly, and I'm actually glad someone mentioned this. So briefly, I do want to give people an update on how Sheikh Amin is doing. I spoke with him the other day. Brother Omar, Sheikh Amin is my teacher, and Sheikh Amin has had some health challenges in the last year or so, and so most people, I think everybody here knows, Sheikh Amin is he's in Arizona, where he's close to his daughter, and he's being taken care of. Alhamdulillah, Sheikh Amin is doing much better than he had been, in that he's clear. He you can talk with him. He's doing okay. He probably will not be in a position to teach again, just because of the health challenges that he's dealing with, and sometimes there may still be some unclarity, right? There still may be some unclarity, but not anything that would be very obvious if you would have a conversation with him. But if you were to ask him questions about the fiqh, you may see some of the unclarity as a result of his health challenges. So we keep him in du'a. And I encourage anyone who wants to just get some extra barakah. I send a gift to Sheikh Amin every month. I try to every month or every other month. This is not something that he asked for. This is not something that's obligatory. This is just us exercising the sunnah that we know of giving and taking care of our teachers, right? The Prophet ﷺ, in one instance, some of the Sahaba, they went out and they, just to restate the story from the hadith quickly, they went to a land where there was a person who was in charge, a ruler or a chief or something, who was in charge, who they needed help. They asked the people to help them, and the people wouldn't help them. People didn't give them any food. So they were getting ready to leave, and the leader of these people fell ill. And so one of the Sahaba said, well, I know some knowledge that can help cure this ruler or this chief or this leader. And so they asked him, and what he did was he recited Quran. I believe it was Fatiha. And he used that, and he recited Fatiha over the leader, and it healed him. And they said, because we healed your leader, the compensation that we want is food and the supplies that we need. And so when they went to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ heard about this, he said, who taught you that? How did you know that Fatiha, that Quran is a healing? And they said, Ya Rasulullah ﷺ, you taught us. He said, good, so then you should give me some of the compensation that they gave you, right? So from this, we learn that the etiquette is that we should push to help our teachers, especially because our teachers like Sheikh Amin, for those of us who know the shuyukh in Senegal, Sheikh Mai, Imam Sheikh Tijani, they are always helping people. They're always giving money away. And so really our giving to them usually is simply something that makes it easier for them to support the other people. But I like the habit, and I encourage other people to get in the habit of giving without any stipulation. So you could give and say, Sheikh, this is for when you're feeding the people, or Sheikh, this is for, when you're hosting people, or Sheikh, this is for you to give to other students of knowledge. Or you can say, Sheikh, this is just a gift for you to spend as you need. And I will share this. Sheikh Amin is not one who likes to ask, but I know that it would be helpful because he's dealing with the financial burden of the medical bills and stuff. And I may never say that in class again because I don't think he would really like me to say it, but I will share it that I know it is helpful. So again, this is not anything obligatory. There's no set amount. There's nothing like that. I'm just letting people know that I, anyone who gives to me for that purpose, I will collect and I will pass it on to Sheikh Amin. So if you would like to do so, please, let me know. I've posted my Cash App in the chat before, so I think most people have that. If you don't have it or you want to give us a different way, just send me a quick text. You can even send me a chat now if you know you need a different way to give, or if you need my Cash App, and I'll share it with you. And you can feel free to give. I think somebody gave while we were talking. So alhamdulillah, may Allah reward you. And then secondly, I want to give an update on our brother Frank, one of our dear brothers who participates in the class. He's also having some health challenges. And so it's a little bit difficult for him to, be in the class virtually like this. I think he may try to follow along on the YouTube video if he's able. But he's also experiencing some health challenges. So please keep him in your dua. Keep him in your dua. I spoke with him maybe a couple of weeks ago, and alhamdulillah, he was, he's able to communicate and he's getting treatment. So just make dua, and inshallah, we hope that the next time we check in with him, he'll be doing better, inshallah ta'ala. And I'll definitely pass on the salams, the greeting from the class, and let him know that we are making dua for him, inshallah ta'ala. So we make dua for those of us that in our community that are sick, that have different kinds of health challenges. Inshallah, we make that a part of our regular practice. And inshallah, we can say Fatiha and Salatul Fatih for both of them and for other people that we may have in our family and in our communities that have health issues, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق الخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره العظيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق الخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره العظيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق الخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره العظيم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. And Sidi Omar, just so you know, the prayer that we did after Fatiha, the Salatu ala Nabi, this is a Salatu ala Nabi called Salatul Fatih. That is many of the scholarly people have said that this is, some say the most blessed, others say one of the most blessed of the Salatu ala Nabi that we can make after Salatu Ibrahimiyya that we make in the Salah. But this is a very, very beautiful prayer on the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Much of it is actually found in an account attributed to the Sahaba Ali, Karamallah Wajh, the Imam, the Khalifa Rashidin, Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu ta'ala, when he was asked by a woman, what's the best way to say Salatu ala Nabi? And he said, word for word, much of what is in Salatul Fatih. And you can find that in the Tafsir of Ibn Kathir. And then later, in the later generations, one of the blessed people, one of the awliya who was making khalwa near the Kaaba, his name was, I believe his name was Sheikh Muhammad Bakri. He was a descendant of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. He made dua and asked Allah to show him the best way to say Salatu ala Nabi. And he had a vision where he saw this prayer, Salatul Fatih, in a sheet of light, right? And the part that is in the Tafsir Ibn Kathir is Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad al-Fatih lima ughliq wal khatim lima sabaqa nasir al-haq bil-haq. And when this wali saw it in the sheet of light, he saw added to it wal hadi ila siratik al-mustaqim. And then after that, we say wa ala ali haqqa qadri madar al-adim, which is on his progeny, right, the followers of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a prayer of a similar magnitude. That's my very short, quick, insufficient explanation of this prayer of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. but it's a good one to become familiar with. And if you or anybody else is interested, I'm happy to send you in writing to see, inshallah ta'ala. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being patient with me. This has been a little bit, this transition of getting into finding a good time and, with watching the baby and, all of that good stuff is, we're still working through it. So thank you for your patience. May Allah reward you all. May Allah bless you all for coming. And we always ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask that He bless us and give us tawfiq in our efforts to acquire and implement and share this knowledge that He accepted from us, and that He forgive us for any mistakes that we make in the process. بجاه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم أرنا حقا حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وارنا باطلا باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للإمام. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الهم والحزن ونعوذ بك من العجز والكسل ونعوذ بك من الجبن والبخل ونعوذ بك من غلبة الدين وقهر الرجال. Although we seek the refuge from anxiety and grief, we seek the refuge from lack of strength and laziness, we seek refuge in you from cowardliness and miserliness, and we seek refuge in you from debt and the oppression of people. بجاه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله. Assalamu alaikum Jamaat. Inshallah, we see you next week.
جزاك الله خير سلام.
Jazakallah khair.
Thank you.
Ameen, ameen. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah, alaikum salam. Thank you. Oh, assalamu alaikum, Sidi Hassan. I'm gonna text you, man. There's a good brother of mine from the Jumat from California who's visiting Philly. So I'm gonna text you his information, inshallah. He's anxious and excited to get with you and Imam Jabal and the whole crew. It's good to see your face, man. Inshallah, we talk soon. Much love. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum salam.